Hello students, today in this video we are going to start with chemistry. Let's see what we are going to start today. The topic which we will be covering in this video is stoichiometry and chemical reaction. As you all know that there are a lot of chemical reactions that are taking place. For example, if you are trying to convert milk into curd, then that can be possible only because of chemical reaction. Likewise, if you use some iron article, let's say if we use a bicycle, and after a few years we see that the actual luster of iron becomes faded and it becomes corroded. So that is also a chemical reaction. But while we write chemical reaction, there are certain specific rules that we have to follow. That is, we have to make use of chemical formulas, we have to make use of valencies, we have to balance them. So everything falls under the stoichiometry. So in this chapter, we'll take up the stoichiometry and the chemical reactions. Topics to be covered in this video are, we'll do physical and chemical changes, then we'll do introduction of chemical reaction and characteristics of chemical reaction, we'll do chemical equation, we'll do chemical formulas, and even we'll study that how to balance the chemical reaction. So let's start with the chapter. So first, let us see an introduction. See, what happens if we see around us, we see lot of changes that occur around us. Lot of changes. Like you have seen the burning of paper, you have seen that water evaporates and goes into atmosphere. You also have seen that the gas can be liquefied. You have also seen that we can make a cup of tea. So likewise, there are lot of changes that are occurring in nature. These changes can be classified into two types. One is the physical change. And other is the chemical change. Like if I talk about burning of paper, this falls in the category of chemical change. And this evaporating of water falls in the category of physical change. So let's make out that what is the difference between the two, that is the chemical change and the physical change. So we have two changes, one is physical, other is chemical change. So let's write it down and write the difference between them. So one is the physical change and other is the chemical change. So in physical change, what we see that no new substance is formed. A change is classified as a physical change when no new substance is formed. For example, if I take an example of converting water into water vapor, if I say that water gets converted to water vapor. So this is an example of physical change, because in this you see that the water remains as water only the form is changing. So that means no new substance is formed and the water remains as water. That is, initially the constituent of water was H2O, and after changing its state, then also the constituent remains the H2O. Just the form is changing, or you can say the state is changing. But if we focus on chemical change, we see that in the chemical change, new substance is formed. New substance is formed. For example, as I took the example of burning of paper. Let's take an example of burning of paper. So let's say if I have a paper and I burn it. So after burning, initially it was paper, right? But after burning, it will form a ash. And even this ash cannot be reversed into paper, right? So the formation of ash from paper give rise to the formation of a new substance. So that means it is a chemical change. Likewise, physical changes are reversible in nature. Physical changes are reversible in nature. That like you converted water to water vapor, this water vapor can be converted back into water. But when we see the chemical change, they are irreversible. They are irreversible. That is, we cannot reverse them. Once the ash is formed from paper, we cannot reverse the ash back into the paper. So we can also say that physical changes are temporary in nature. Physical changes are temporary in nature. But chemical changes, they are permanent. They are permanent because they are irreversible. Likewise, during a physical change, no net energy change take place. No net energy changes take place. Right. But when there is a change, that is chemical change, then energy changes take place. Energy changes take place. And energy changes take place in a way that either the energy is absorbed or the energy is released. And due to this, the overall change of energy occur whenever a chemical change take place. Likewise, in a physical change, there is no involvement of enzymes and all. So no enzymes are involved. But when we talk of chemical change, there are certain chemical change in which enzymes participate. In which the enzymes participate. So these are the few points of difference between physical and a chemical change. Let's take up another example. If I say a physical change, I can say that condensation of water. Let's say condensation of water. What is that? Condensation means when the water vapor gets converted back into water. Right? That is also a physical change. Likewise, if I take another example of chemical change, making curd from milk is an example of chemical change. So there are a lot of examples. I have just written 2 examples in each case, but there are a lot of examples which are occurring, or you can say which you can see around you. So whenever in a change there is no new substance formed and the change is reversible and the state can be reversed, or you can say the change can be reversed and it's temporary, no net energy changes involved, enzymes doesn't involve, those changes are regarded as physical change. But if new substance is formed and the change is irreversible, permanent, energy changes are occurring and the enzymes can also participate, that change is regarded as chemical change. So I think you got it, that what is physical change and chemical change. In this chapter, we'll consider the chemical change. The most important chemical change can be termed as the chemical reaction. Can be termed as chemical reaction. So let's study about the chemical reaction. So we have introduction of chemical reaction. What we have seen that some substances when mixed, they form some new substance. That is, you are mixing few substances and when they get mixed, they form some other substance. That is a new substance. Like if we want to make tea, what do? You add sugar, you add tea, you add milk and you add water to a pan. And then what do? You heat it and finally on heating, it becomes tea. So all these ingredients just mix together on heating and they result in the formation of new substance, that is tea. Likewise, if you add a spoon of curd to lukewarm milk, like in a container, I took a lukewarm milk. Let's say I have a lukewarm milk in it. And what I'm doing is, I'm adding a spoon of curd to it. And after adding, what I do with the stirrer, I just stir it. And I stir in a way that this curd molecules get spread in this lukewarm water milk. Then what I do, I cover it with a lid and keep it aside for few hours. Then what happens when you keep aside for few hours in a hot or condition, right? So what happens, then the whole milk turns into curd. That is, the whole lukewarm changes into curd. So the formation of curd from milk is also an example of chemical change, or you can say that is also a chemical reaction, because initially it was milk. When you added spoon of curd to it, then they both mixed, and under specific condition it gave rise to curd. Now the whole milk has changed to curd. So that means we got a new substance, and this curd cannot be changed back into the milk. So that means the change which has occurred is irreversible and permanent. So this is an example of chemical reaction. Likewise, when you make tea, you add all the ingredients as we have seen, that sugar, tea, milk, water, everything. And when we heat it, it gives rise to a tea, right? And this tea which is formed cannot be reversed back into the tea, milk, sugar, and water. So that means the change which has occurred is irreversible and permanent. So again, this is chemical reaction. So what we concluded is that when we thoroughly mix the ingredients, like we mix the tea, water, milk, and sugar, so they give rise to a new substance. So this thorough mixing is called as chemical reaction, and it is a chemical change. So how we'll define the chemical reaction? We'll say that when two or more substances are mixed, what they do, they react and they form some new substance. So this is called as chemical reaction. So that means chemical reaction is a process when two or more substances are mixed, they react with each other and they lead to formation of new substance. So that is a chemical reaction. So the reaction involves the substances that are initially mixed and the new substances which are formed on account of chemical reaction. So the substances that are mixed and those substances which react, they are termed as reactants. What are they called as? They are called as reactants. And the new ones which are formed are called as products. So that means any reaction undergoes a chemical change, or you can say it is an example of or an application of chemical change. And in this, the reactants are involved and the products are involved. So like if you were adding a spoon of curd to a milk, right? So these were reactants. These were reactants. And when they got mixed up, the milk thoroughly changes into curd. So this curd is the product. This curd is a product. So that means the reaction involved reactants and products. Likewise, when we were making tea, what we used water, we used tea, we used sugar, we used milk. And what we did, we provided a specific condition that we heated it, and all of them just got mixed and formed tea. So these were reactants. This tea means tea leaves, right? So they got mixed, and what they did, they actually mixed and they are called as reactants, and this tea which is formed is called as product. So here also the reaction involves the reactant and the product. So whenever the reaction is taking place, right, whenever the reaction is taking place, there will be the involvement of reactants and there will be the involvement of products. Reactants are written on the left hand side and products are written on the right hand side. Now let's do few activities related to chemical reaction. So first activity which we are doing in order to understand the chemical reaction is burning of magnesium ribbon, right? So let's say we have a magnesium ribbon. So when we bring this magnesium ribbon, or when we use this magnesium ribbon, or when we purchase this magnesium ribbon, so with short span of time, what we see that it is not free of impurities. It has a layer of carbonate on it. So when we will use this magnesium ribbon, we have to remove this layer. And how we remove it? We remove it by rubbing it with sandpaper. Got it? I'll just read for you. The magnesium ribbon always has a layer of carbonate on it because magnesium is quite reactive. It reacts with air and forms a layer of carbonate on its surface. So before using it, because we just need the magnesium ribbon, not any other thing. So in order to have the pure magnesium, what we'll do is we'll rub it with sandpaper. And when we'll rub it with sandpaper, this carbonate layer gets removed. Right. Now what we are doing is we will burn the magnesium ribbon. So what we do is we take a burner and with the help of tongs, we are holding the magnesium ribbon. And when we bring this magnesium ribbon with the help of tongs to the burner, it starts burning, as you can see in the figure. So what kind of burning is there? What kind of spark that you can see? We can see the white dazzling flame. As you can see that the flame which is here is a kind of a sparkling white flame. So we can call it as white dazzling flame. So what is actually taking place? We had magnesium, we reacted or we burnt it in presence of oxygen because oxygen is supporter of combustion, and when they both actually got mixed or reacted, they form magnesium oxide, and this color of magnesium oxide is white. So in this reaction, these are reactants and MgO is product. So this is an example of chemical reaction. So whenever a chemical reaction takes place, there are certain characteristics which actually proves that yes, the chemical reaction has taken place. So what is the identification property of this reaction? Or you can say, what changes do you observe when the magnesium and oxygen react to form magnesium oxide? So changes what we observed is that MgNO2 got converted into a white color powder, that is MgO. That is, initially it was a ribbon and it was a gas, but when they reacted, they got converted into a powder form, that is white color powdered magnesium oxide. And the other thing what we saw is that we observed the white dazzling flame. So these two properties actually indicate that yes, the chemical reaction has taken place. Let's do another activity. So in this activity, what we are doing is we are reacting zinc granules with dilute sulfuric acid. You know that zinc granules is Zn and sulfuric acid is H2SO4. Dilute sulfuric acid means it has more content of water in it. It has more content of water in it. So zinc granules, zinc can be taken as zinc coin, can be taken as zinc rod, can be taken as zinc granules. So when we take granules, actually, you know that the rate of reaction becomes more. The reason being, whenever any substance is having a more surface area exposed, so these reactants can actually collide effectively and give rise to product more effectively. Or you can say the zinc granules make the reaction more efficient because they have more surface area exposed. So these reactants can combine with each other or react with each other in an effective manner. So what we'll do in this activity, we'll take this container. We'll take this container, and this container is called as conical flask. So what we are doing is we are taking zinc granules in it. As you can see that these granules, these are zinc granules. And then what we are doing, we are adding dilute sulfuric acid to it. We are adding dilute sulfuric acid into it. And the opening of this conical flask is closed with the help of cork, and there is a tube also. In order to, you can say, this tube helps in the evolution of a gas if in case it is produced after a reaction. So what happened? We have a zinc granules and we do have the sulfuric acid. So when they both are mixed, they react with each other, and zinc react with sulfate to form zinc sulfate, and along with that we get hydrogen gas. So that means this reaction take place. So what is the final product? It is zinc sulfate and hydrogen gas. So this is what that we see when we mix zinc granules and dilute sulfuric acid. Now, what is the identification property for this reaction? The identification property is whenever this reaction takes place, the beaker becomes hot from outside. The beaker becomes like if you touch the beaker from outside, you will feel that it is somewhat hot now. And the hydrogen gas which is produced can move from this tube to outside and it can be tested also. So see, whenever any gas is liberated, so in order to identify the gas, what we do a specific test, because for every gas we have a identification test that we can do and make out, or you can say we can identify the gas which is evolved. So for hydrogen gas, what we can do is we can bring the matchstick. We bring the matchstick near the, you can say the mouth of the glass tube. What happens? It starts burning. It starts burning. It starts burning because hydrogen gas supports combustion, right? The second thing is that it starts burning with a specific sound, that is the popping sound. It starts burning with the popping sound, and popping sound is the identification property of the hydrogen gas. And one more thing, the flame which was emitted was pale blue flame. So this pale blue flame and the popping sound and the supporter of combustion proves that the gas which is produced is hydrogen gas. So in this reaction, the substances that initially react are zinc and sulfuric acid, and they are called as reactants. And the products which are formed are zinc sulfate and hydrogen gas. So in this case, ZnSO4 and H2 are products. So I think you got it, that how the reaction between zinc and dilute sulfuric acid can take place. So we have seen that whenever a chemical reaction takes place, there are certain changes which we come across and we can make out that yes, the chemical reaction has taken place. So those changes or those identification properties are called as characteristics of chemical reaction. So whenever a chemical reaction takes place, what changes we can actually see that can actually make out that yes, the chemical reaction has taken place. So it is either accompanied by the change in color. Sometimes what happens that you take two substances which possess other color, but when you react, the product formed has different color. Like in this example, you can see that in this picture, initially they are of somewhat colorless, but when you are mixing them, you can see this yellow precipitate form. So the change in color can actually indicate the chemical reaction. Second, we can see a change, like there can be a state change. There can be a state change. That means initially the reactants that are taken can be in some other state, like let's say they can be in solid or liquid state, but the product formed can be liquid, solid or gas depending upon the nature of the product. For example, if you take hydrogen and you react with oxygen, so in this case these both are gases, but when you react them, you get a product H2O, which is liquid at room temperature. So there can be a change in state also. Third, whenever a chemical reaction takes place, the heat energy is produced or absorbed. We know that chemical reaction is an application of chemical change. We have already done. So whenever a chemical change occurs, we have studied that energy changes do take place. So likewise, if we talk about chemical reaction, the identification property can be that heat energy is either produced or absorbed. So that means energy changes can also occur. Like we did an activity where we reacted zinc with dilute sulfuric acid. So what we come across? We come across that after the reaction, the beaker becomes hot from outside. So that means when the reaction is taking place, the heat energy is produced in this case. So likewise, there can be a reaction where heat energy is absorbed. So that means heat energy or energy changes are also taking place whenever a chemical reaction is taking place. Fourth, we can get to see the formation of precipitate. What is precipitate now? See, precipitate is the insoluble substance that is formed as a result of reaction and it settles at bottom. Like in this example, in this figure, this yellow substance which is formed is a precipitate because it is not soluble in this solvent. So precipitate is something, an insoluble substance which is formed due to chemical reaction which is occurring between any reactants. But every time the precipitate is not formed. Sometimes the precipitate is formed. It just depends upon the nature of reactants that we are using. And sometimes what we see that gas is released. Like in this example, you saw that when we reacted zinc with sulfuric acid, they both reacted and as a result, the hydrogen gas was released. So in this case, the gas is released. So likewise, there are many examples in which you'll get to see that gas may also released due to the chemical reaction that is taking place. For example, if I take calcium carbonate and I heat it. So on heating, what I'll get is, I'll get calcium oxide and carbon dioxide. So this carbon dioxide proves the release of gas. And similarly, we can test for this carbon dioxide also as we did for hydrogen gas. The test for carbon dioxide is that it turns lime water milky. It turns lime water milky. Like if you will pass this carbon dioxide through lime water, which is CaOH whole twice. So if you will pass this carbon dioxide through lime water, it will form CaCO3, calcium carbonate, right, and water, and this will actually cause the milkiness in the lime water solution. So the test for carbon dioxide is that it turns lime water milky. And for hydrogen, we already did that if you bring the matchstick, then it starts burning with pale blue flame and popping sound. Now we have chemical equation. What do you mean by chemical equation? See, chemical equation is actually a representation of chemical reaction. So it is the correct method to write or explain the chemical reaction. And when we write the chemical equation, we make use of symbols, we make use of molecular formulas, we make use of moles, we make use of states. That means the chemical equation is actually the complete information of chemical reaction. So, as we know that all chemical reaction obeys law of combination. Right. What is law of combination? Law of combination is actually divided into two laws. One is the law of conservation of mass. Law of conservation of mass actually means that whenever a chemical reactions take place, the total mass of reactants becomes equal to total mass of product. That means the mass is not changed. Like initially, if you have started with, let's say 24 grams, so the product in total will be 24 grams. So that means mass is not changed in the reaction. That means mass of reactant is always equal to mass of product. Because we can neither create mass nor we can destroy it. It remains always conserved. And the second thing, what we obey. Now let's do the chemical formulas. As I told you that in chemical reaction, we'll make use of chemical formulas in order to form an equation. We'll make use of moles. We'll specify the states and like that. But what are actually the chemical formulas? See, chemical formulas is the symbolic representation of a compound. That means, like if I say I have a sodium chloride, so instead of writing like this, the sodium chloride, in chemistry, we make use of chemical formula that we use specific symbols. We actually form the specific formula for it. Like for sodium chloride, it is NaCl, right? One Na and one Cl forms the one molecule of NaCl. So, when you're writing in this way, so this is a symbolic representation of compound which shows that what are the constituents and in which ratio of volume and mass they are actually combined with each other. But if you want to learn to write the chemical formulas for any compound, we have to learn the valencies first and about radicals first. Because if we are thorough with the valencies and radicals, then only we can formulate the chemical formulas. Now, valencies, I think you know, like just to recall, we know that like if I talk about aluminium, the symbol of aluminium is Al and atomic number is 13. And if we write its electronic configuration, is this 283. And we know that the elements that possess 1, 2 or 3 valence electron, their valencies are +1, +2 and +3. And if we have the element with valence electron 5, 4, then its valency is ±4. And if the element has valence electron 5, 6, 7, then its valency is this number minus from 8. That is -3, -2, -1. And if the substance has 8 as valence electron, its valency is 0. And that is for noble gases. Right. So this is how at least you can make the valencies for 1 to 20 elements. That is the elements having the atomic number 1 to 20. You can write the atomic number, you can write the configuration, and by looking at the valence electron, you can make out their valencies. So now what are radicals? Radicals are actually the group of atoms. Radicals are the group of atoms that bears a charge. Group of atoms that bears a charge. For example, if I say that I have a bicarbonate ion, let's say I'm writing here, you can also copy it, that I have bicarbonate ion. So this is a radical because the formula for this bicarbonate ion is something this. So you can see that it has different group of atoms. It has hydrogen, it has carbon, and it also has oxygen. And there is a charge also on it. So this is what is radical. So when you get to see different atoms combined together forming a group and they also bear a charge, then they are called as radicals. For example, if I have sulfate ion. So what is sulfate? Sulfate is the group of sulfur and oxygen atoms, and they also bear a charge. So that means this is also a radical. So let's learn about the valencies and radicals. So the first thing which we are doing is hydrogen. Hydrogen, you know that it has 1 electron and its electronic configuration is also 1. Its valence electron is also 1. So what is the charge on it? It is regarded as H positive. Sodium, we know that its atomic number is 11. Its configuration is 281. And as it possesses 1 as valence electron, its valency is going to be +1. So it is indicated by Na positive. Ammonium is a radical, that is the group of atoms of nitrogen and hydrogen, and they also bear a charge. Chloride, you know that chlorine possesses 17 atomic number, configuration is 287, and by looking at 7, you know that its valency is -1. So what are the charges on them? Hydrogen possesses 1, sodium possesses +1, hydrogen can be +1 and it also can be -1 depending upon the atom to which it is combining. Like if it is combining with metal, then its valency use is H negative. But if it is combining with some non-metal, then the valency use is H positive. On sodium also you have +1, on ammonium also you have +1, on chloride you have -1. This plus indicates that they are, you can say if we are talking about the elements, just the elements, not the radicals, then this plus specifies that the element has a tendency to lose electron. And if there is negative charge, that specifies that the atom possesses the tendency to gain electron. Likewise, we have a radical that is hydroxide, which is a group of oxygen and hydrogen, and they also possess a charge. So the charge on it is -1. Similarly, we have chlorate. It is a group of Cl and oxygen atom, and they also bear a charge that is -1. Next, we have bicarbonate. It is a group of atoms of hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen, and they also bear a charge. Next we have is bisulfate. It is also a group of atoms of hydrogen, sulfur, oxygen with a negative charge. Permanganate ion is the group of atoms of manganese and oxygen atom with a charge. So that means the charge on it is, it's not positive. We have permanganate, which is a group of atoms of manganese and oxygen atom with one negative charge. So the charge is -1. We have barium, its valency is 2 positive, so we have +2. We have magnesium, its valency is +2, so again we can write as +2. Next we have cupric. Cupric actually denotes the copper. Copper possesses two valencies, one is plus and one is 2 positive. Copper atom with one positive charge is called as cuprous because it is having a lower valency. But when it is 2 positive, it is said to be cupric. But overall, they specify the copper. So here we are talking about cupric, and cupric means Cu2 positive. So that means it possesses +2 charge on it. Ferrous specify iron. And iron also possesses two valencies. One is +2 and one is +3. Or you can say 2 positive and 3 positive. So 2 positive one is called as ferrous and 3 positive one is called as ferric. So here we are talking about ferrous. So it is +2. Third, we have aluminium. Aluminium possesses the valency of +3 because the atomic number is 13, configuration is 283, and 3 valence electron specifies that it possesses +3 valency. We have antimony, that is Sp3 positive, that is +3. We have boron, again 3 positive, +3. We have ferric. I told you that ferric specify iron with +3 valency. We have phosphate, which is a group of atoms of phosphorus and oxygen atom, and they also bear a charge that is 3 negative. We have the radical phosphide. What is phosphide? Phosphide is actually a phosphorus only. Phosphorus possesses 15 atomic number. Configuration is 285. And if we look at its valence electron, we can make out that its valency is -3. So what charge is there on phosphorus? That is -3. Nitride is nitrogen, atomic number 7, configuration 25, valency is -3. So here also the valency is -3, not +3. So it is -3. You have seen that like when we wrote the chlorine, we wrote it as chloride and we wrote it as nitride and phosphide. So actually the elements with negative valencies, I'll write this phosphide again first. All the elements with negative valencies are changed into IDE form, indicating that they are the atom with negative charge. That is, they are forming the respective anions. So the name of anion always end with IDE. Now let's make some chemical formulas. So let's take first example. If I say I need to write the formula for zinc sulfate. If I need to write the formula for zinc sulfate, we know that zinc is Zn. Zinc is Zn. And sulfate, we already studied, is SO4 2 negative. So Zn and SO4 2 negative. And the valency of zinc is +2. Right. So what are the symbols which we will be using for zinc sulfate? We'll be using Zn2 positive. That is an atom with its valency, and the radical, that is sulfate, with SO4 2 negative formula. Now while writing the chemical formula, what you have to do, you have to write these atoms as they are written in a similar manner. Like if there is any subscript, you don't have to change it. You have to carry it forward. Now what we'll do is, we'll write the valency of this thing as a subscript to this part, and we'll write the valency of this thing as a subscript to zinc. But here in this case, both the valencies are equal. So they will cancel and the formula will be just ZnSO4. Right, let's take up another example. Let's say I need to write for calcium chloride. Let's write for calcium chloride. So let's write the symbols first. Calcium and chloride specify chlorine. Now we know that the valency for calcium is +2. And for chloride, that means a chlorine with negative charge, that is Cl negative. So when we'll crisscross, the Ca will remain Cl and Cl will remain Cl. There is no subscript, so we haven't written any subscript. But now we'll write these valencies. We'll interchange these valencies and we'll write the respective valencies in the foot of the other element. That is, we'll crisscross that. So this is 2 positive. So when we are crisscrossing, we don't have to carry this positive and negative charge. Not in this and not even in this. So only this 2 is going to move. So it becomes CaCl2. And it possesses 1 charge. So whether you write 1 or not, it is not necessary. So formula becomes CaCl2. Let's take another example. Let's say we have silver nitrate. We have silver nitrate. Silver is Ag and nitrate is NO3 negative. That is a radical. And silver possesses the valency of Ag positive. So when you will crisscross, it will become AgNO3. There will be no subscript further added, like 3 will remain as such. Otherwise, you don't have to put any subscript because their valencies are 1 and 1 and there's no need to write 1. Similarly, if we take another example, let's take an example of aluminium oxide. Let's take an example of aluminium oxide. For aluminium, it is Al and for oxygen, it is O. Let's write their valencies. That is 3 positive and this is 2 negative. So when you will crisscross, Al will remain as Al and oxygen will remain as O. This 2 will be written as the subscript to Al and this 3 will written as the subscript to O. So the formula becomes Al2O3. Similarly, let's say we have to write the formula for calcium bicarbonate. We are writing the formula for calcium bicarbonate. So the valency is Ca2 positive and for bicarbonate it is HCO3 negative. So when you're crisscrossing, Ca will remain Ca and HCO3 will be carried in the same manner. Now this is 2. So you don't have to write 2 like this because this 2 will be subscript to this whole part, that is HCO3. Then you have to enclose it in bracket and then you have to write 2. And if we talk about HCO3, that is only 1 and there is no need to write 1. So the formula becomes CaHCO3 whole twice. How you call it? CaHCO3 whole twice. Let's look for the another formula. Let's say we need to write for sodium sulfate. We need to write for sodium sulfate. So sodium is Na and sulfate is SO4 2 negative. The valency for sodium is Na positive. So when we'll crisscross, we will have NaSO4 in the same manner. This 2 will be a subscript to Na and there is 1, so there is no need of writing anything. You don't have to enclose this Na into a bracket, right, as we did in this case. The reason being, this Na is only one atom or one element. It is not a group of atoms. So when you're writing group of atom and there is subscript, then you have to enclose a bracket. Otherwise, you don't have to put any bracket. Let's write the other formula also. Let's write for potassium chlorate. Let's write for potassium chlorate. We know that the symbol for potassium is K and for chlorate this is ClO3 negative and the valency of potassium is positive. So when you crisscross it, it becomes KClO3, that is 3 is carried along and the 1 and 1 valency cancels, so the formula becomes KClO3. Likewise, if you need to write for ammonium sulfate, you know that ammonium sulfate is a good fertilizer. So how you can write its chemical formula? Ammonium is NH4 positive and sulfate is SO4 2 negative. So when you crisscross it, this NH4 is written as this and sulfate is also carried like this. So whatever is the subscript that is carried along, you don't have to change it, right? But now the valency for the ammonium is 1. So there is no need to enclose it in bracket and write 1 because 1 is not necessary to be written. But this sulfate has 2 valencies, so we are going to write 2, but obviously this is a radical, so we are going to enclose this in a bracket. So the formula becomes NH4 whole twice. You don't call it as 2. it's not the right way to say that NH4 whole 2, right? So it's better that you say NH4 whole twice SO4. So that is ammonium sulfate. Now let's write for, let's say, magnesium hydroxide. Let's write for magnesium hydroxide. So let's write the symbols with the valencies. Magnesium is Mg2 positive and hydroxide is OH negative. So when you crisscross it, it becomes MgOH. It is written in a similar manner. This 2 moves and act as a subscript to OH. So it becomes MgOH whole twice. Right. Similarly, if you want to write for lead iodide, let's write for lead iodide. Lead is Pb and iodide means iodine. If you write the valencies, it is 2 positive and 1 negative. So when you crisscross it, it becomes PbI and this 2 becomes the subscript to I. But you don't have to enclose in a bracket because this is not a radical. Now let's start with balancing of chemical reaction. As I've already told you that all the chemical reaction actually obeys the law of chemical combination, which further has a law, that is law of conservation of mass, which states that whenever a chemical reaction is taking place, the mass always remain conserved. That is, the mass can never be created, mass can never be destroyed. Let's take an example. If I say that there is a chemical reaction in which the reactants are A and B and they are reacting to form AB. Let's say if the mass of A is taken as 20 grams and for B it is 4 grams. So this product will have a mass of 24 grams because the mass of reactants, the overall mass was 24 grams. So obviously there is one product, so the whole mass should be of this AB, that is the 24 grams. It cannot have 20 gram mass or 22 gram mass or 24.5 gram mass or 25 grams. It possess mass equal to the mass of reactants because all the chemical reaction obey law of conservation of mass. Like initially you started with 24 grams, so it has to be 24. It cannot be less or more than 24. And let's say if you have a reaction in which A, B, C and combining and you get a product, let's say AB plus C. And let's say if the mass of A is 20, B is 1 gram and C is 3 gram, that is overall becomes 24 grams. So the mass of product has to be 24. It can be like this, that AB is having more mass or C is having more or less mass, but in total the calculation should be equal to 24 grams because the mass of reactant is 24. So that means that every reaction obeys this law, that is law of conservation of mass. That is that it is compulsory that the mass of reactants has to be equal to mass of products because mass can never be created nor be destroyed in a chemical reaction. It is always conserved. So in order to obey this law, that is to show the conservation of mass, we have to balance the chemical reaction. We have to balance the chemical reaction. For example, if I say that while we are forming water, H2 and O2 react and they form H2O. Now in this case, how many moles of hydrogen you can see? We can see that there are 2 atoms of hydrogen. 2 atoms of hydrogen. And in this case, again, there are 2 oxygen atoms. But if we compare it with H2O, so the total H on the left hand side and the right hand side should be equal. So on left hand side, it is 2 and on the right hand side, it is again 2. That means hydrogen is obeying the law of conservation of mass, that is its moles are balanced. But if we talk about oxygen, it is 2 on this side but 1 on this side. So can this be possible? No, because the mass of oxygen atoms or any other atom on the left hand side has to be equal to the mass of atoms on the right hand side. And even the total mass of reactant and products should be equal. So In order to make it equal, in order to balance the oxygen atom, we have to follow a certain set of rules. And when we follow those rules, the reaction becomes balanced and it starts obeying the law of conservation of mass. So whenever you are doing balancing, you are permitted to write here, right? That is in the front of compound, not in between the atoms or not as superscript or subscript. You are permitted to write only in the front of the chemical formula of any compound. So in order to balance it, like we know that here we have two oxygen atom and here we have one oxygen atom. So if I write 2 here, so what happened? This oxygen atom now becomes 2. This oxygen atom now becomes 2. But if we check it again, that all the atoms that are involved are balanced or not, we'll see that hydrogen is 2, but in this case hydrogen has become 4 now. Hydrogen has become 4. So we have to balance this side of hydrogen by putting 2, because when you will put 2, this 2 into 2 becomes 4. Now this equation is balanced. We can cross check. We have 4 hydrogen atoms and here also we have 4 hydrogen atoms. Here we have 2 oxygen atoms and here also we have 2 oxygen atoms. One thing I want to discuss with you, let's say if I have written like this, so what does it specify? It specifies that it is oxygen atom. How many atoms? Nothing is written in front, so that means it is 1 atom. If it is written like this, so that means this O is an atom. How many atoms? This 2 specify that there are 2 atoms of oxygen. If I write O as O2, it is not obeyed by O, it is for every atom. Like if it is written O2, then it specifies that it is not an atom, it is molecule in this case. Whenever any subscript is already written, it specifies that it is a molecule, not an atom. How many molecules? Nothing is written in front, that means it is 1 molecule of oxygen. If it is written like this, then again by looking at O2 you can make out that this is a molecule of oxygen. How many molecules? 2. So I think you got it, how you'll gonna differentiate between oxygen atom and molecule. Now if I have a molecule like this, 2O2, so this is confirmed that we have 2 molecules of oxygen. I'll write it down. This is 2 molecules of oxygen. Now if I ask you that how many atoms of oxygen are there, how many atoms is shown by this formula. So what you're going to do is you have to multiply these terms. You don't have to add them. You have to multiply them. So it becomes 4. Like another example, because here the sum and the multiplication answer is same, so you might get confused. Let's take an example like this. If I say 3O2, that means this indicates 3 molecules of oxygen. It indicates 3 molecules of oxygen. But if I ask you how many atoms of oxygen are there in it, so what you're going to do is you have to multiply them, not add. So the answer is not going to be 5 oxygen atoms. It is going to be 3 into 2, 6 oxygen atoms. So I think you got it. So this is the technique which you have to follow while calculating the atoms. Like here nothing was written, but here in front 2 was written. So this 2 actually specify that there are 2 oxygen atoms. But if in case we have the formula like this, right? So this specifies the oxygen atoms are 4, because we are going to multiply this 2 with this 2. And even the hydrogen will be 2 into 2, that is 4. So the hydrogen atoms are also 4 and oxygen is also 4. So I think you got it that while you're balancing, how you need to calculate the atoms. Now let's do few examples. So let's take an example. Like we have Cu plus O2, copper plus oxygen, we get copper oxide. We get copper oxide. So we saw that the atom on the left hand side, that is copper, is 1 and oxygen atoms are 2. If we compare with the right hand side, copper atom is 1 and oxygen atom is also 1. So that means the equation is not balanced. It is not following the law of conservation of mass, and we need to follow them. We need to balance them. So copper is already balanced, 1 and 1 on both the sides, but we need to balance oxygen. How we can balance? I told you that we are permitted to write here not in middle. So we'll write 2 here, because while writing 2, what it becomes? Copper becomes 2 now. Copper becomes 2 now, and oxygen also becomes 2. So when you balance like this, please make sure that you cross-check the equation. So now let us cross-check. So that means oxygen is balanced in this case now. But what happened to copper now? Copper is 1 on left hand side, but now on right hand side, after balancing oxygen, it has become 2. So we need to balance copper. So we don't have to put anything here. We'll just put 2 this side, and now this equation becomes balanced. You can see that 2 copper on left hand side, 2 copper on right hand side, 2 oxygen atoms, and here also 2 oxygen atom. So likewise, you have to balance the reaction. Let's do for another example. N2 plus O2 forms 2NO. Right. So in this, what you get to see is, let's take in another example in which N2 reacts with O2 and it forms the NO. Now the atoms of nitrogen on left hand side are 2 and oxygen atoms are also 2. But on the right hand side, the number of nitrogen atom is 1 and oxygen is also 1. So we need to balance it. So first we'll balance the nitrogen, let's say. So nitrogen is 2, we can balance by putting 2. And now oxygen is 2. Now when you'll look at the right hand side, you'll see that oxygen is balanced now. Because while you were balancing nitrogen, the oxygen becomes automatically balanced. So this is a chemical reaction, that is the balanced chemical reaction now. So likewise, you can balance the other reactions also. Let's take an example in which copper reacts with silver nitrate to form copper nitrate and we get silver. Let's balance this reaction now. So in this case, copper is 1 on left hand side and even on right hand side it is 1. Silver is 1 on left hand side and on the right hand side also this is 1. If we talk about nitrogen, it is 1 on left hand side, but on right hand side it is 2. And if we write oxygen, it is 3 on left hand side and on right hand side it is 6. So that means we need to balance nitrogen and oxygen. So how we can balance nitrogen? It is 2 on this side and 1 on this side. So obviously we'll try to put 2 on this side. So now let's see that is nitrogen balanced or not. So now in this case, nitrogen has become 2 and in this also the nitrogen is 2. So that means nitrogen is balanced now. Now let's balance oxygen. Balance is, oxygen is 3 into 2, that is 6 this side. While you were balancing the nitrogen, the oxygen moles got changed and it becomes 6 now. And how many nitrogen we get to see on the right hand side? 6. So that means while balancing nitrogen, the other atom automatically got balanced. So this is a chemical reaction, or you can say a balanced chemical reaction now. Let's do another example. Let's say we have PbNO3 whole twice, that is lead nitrate, right? And it reacts with potassium iodide. And what we get to see it forms lead iodide and it forms potassium nitrate. Let's count the moles on left and right side for different atoms. For lead, it is 1. For nitrogen, it is 2. For oxygen, 3 into 2, it is 6. For potassium, it is 1. For iodine, again, it is 1. On the right hand side, lead is 1, iodine is 2, potassium is 1, nitrogen is 1, oxygen is 3. So that means lead is balanced, right? And what else is balanced? Potassium is balanced, but nitrogen, oxygen, I'll write here nitrogen, oxygen and iodine is not balanced. So let's balance them first. Let's balance nitrogen and iodine first. So nitrogen is 2 and here we have 1. So I will write 2 on this side. Right. So while you write 2, let's see that is nitrogen balanced or not now. So we have lead 1, again 1, nitrogen as 2. So nitrogen is 2 on this side and on this side now it has become 2 after balancing. Now we have oxygen, oxygen is 6 and on this side it also formed 6 because while you were balancing nitrogen, it automatically becomes 6 now. So that means the mole of oxygen on left and right side is balanced now. Potassium was already balanced. Iodine is 1 on this side and 2 on this side. So let us put 2 on this side. So it becomes 2 Ki. But initially when we saw K was 1 in one case, and before putting this 2, even the K got unbalanced because here you put 2 and here it was still 1. So while you were balancing iodine, the potassium also automatically got balanced. Now the moles of on left hand side and right hand side are equal. So that means this is the balanced chemical reaction now. Now let's do few questions and answers. First question is, explain the activity which involves the reaction between the barium iodide and the lead chloride. Barium iodide is Ba2. And you can actually make out the formula. The valency for barium is 2 positive and iodine is negative. We'll crisscross and we get this desired formula as Ba2. And for lead chloride, it is PbCl2. How come? Pb is 2 positive, Cl is negative. When you crisscross, you get this formula. And we need to react them. So what we do is PbCl2 plus Ba2, what it will form? Pb will react with iodine and barium will react with chlorine. This is how the reaction will take place. So when Pb will react with iodine, we'll form the chemical formula for this. So this is PbI2. And we know that barium will react with chlorine. Let's form the formula for it also. So it is going to be BaCl2. So if you'll make a habit of interchanging these valencies and making out the chemical formulas, your chemical reaction will never go wrong. So in this way, you have to complete the chemical reaction. So let's take up an activity now because this was the reaction. We have to see an activity. So in this, what we took 2 containers, and in both the containers, in one we had lead chloride and in the other we have barium iodide. So when we are mixing, we are slowly pouring the one liquid into another, and what we get to see that when we pour, the reaction is taking place which leads to the formation of lead iodide and barium chloride. And what is the identification property? This change in color, or you can say this formation of precipitate, the yellow color precipitate of lead iodide, confirms that the reaction has taken place. So in this case, the products are PbI2 and BaCl2, and reactants are PbCl2 and Ba2. Another question is, what information do you get from this chemical reaction? The reaction is CaCO3 plus 2HCl, CaCl2, H2O and CO2. So the information that we get is first that this is a chemical reaction because some new substances are being formed. And this representation is a chemical equation. Right. The other thing that it involves the formulas for various compounds. And what are those compounds? Calcium carbonate, hydrogen chloride, calcium chloride, water and carbon dioxide. Let me write. One is calcium carbonate. Other is hydrogen chloride. Other one is calcium chloride. Other one is water. And the last is carbon dioxide. That is a gas. So these are the compounds which are involved. And we can specify the moles also. So in this, the moles are just 2 HCl moles. Otherwise, all compounds are having 1 mole. So we can say that 1 mole of CaCO3 react with 2 mole of HCl, forming 1 mole of CaCl2, 1 mole of water and 1 mole of carbon dioxide. One more thing, the species which are written on the left hand side, they indicate the reactants. So that means in this case, the reactants are calcium carbonate and hydrogen chloride. And these species which are written on the right hand side, they are the products. So in this reaction, the products are calcium chloride, water and carbon dioxide. So overall, we can say that this is a chemical reaction which is written as chemical equation in which the reactants are CaCO3 and HCl and the products are CaCl2, carbon dioxide and water. And we can also say that in this 1 mole of CaCO3 react with 2 moles of HCl to give 1 mole of calcium chloride and 1 mole of carbon dioxide and 1 mole of water. Another question is, we have to write the chemical equations which are involved. We are given with word equations and we have to write the proper chemical equation involving the formulas and all. So first is potassium chlorate breaks to form potassium chloride and oxygen gas. So you'll start with the reactant first, potassium chlorate. So let's make out its formula in the rough. So this is KClO3. So KClO3 breaks, that means it is not going to react, it is just breaking under specific condition. And what does it form? That means these are products. One is potassium chloride. Let's make out its formula in the rough. So it is KCl, and along with that you get oxygen gas. So this is the chemical equation for this given reaction. Another is zinc reacts with hydrogen chloride. So that means these are the reactants to form zinc chloride and hydrogen gas. So this is the product, hydrogen and zinc chloride. So let's write for reactant first. Zinc means Zn. Reacts with other reactant, that means you need to put the plus sign. Hydrogen chloride, let's make out the formula in the rough. It is HCl. Product, that means we have to form means the arrow. Then we get zinc chloride. Let's make the formula in the rough again. So it is ZnCl2 and hydrogen gas is written as H2. Third, we have aluminium oxide reacts with sulfuric acid. That means these are reactants to form aluminium sulfate and water. So these are the products. So aluminium oxide, let's make out the formula in rough. Al3 positive and O2 negative. Right. So while we crisscross, it becomes Al2O3. So aluminium oxide, sulfuric acid we know is H2SO4. Product is aluminium sulfate. Let's make out its formula. 3 positive and sulfate is 2 negative. Crisscrossing, we get Al2SO4 whole thrice plus water. So this is how you're going to write the chemical equation if the word equations are given to you. Please make sure that initially you make a habit of making the chemical formulas in rough and then copy it into the your exact answer which you are writing. That is your final answer. Now the question is, write the balanced chemical equation. Initially we wrote the chemical equation and now we need to balance also. So the first is potassium chlorate breaks to form potassium chloride and oxygen gas. So potassium chlorate is KClO3. It breaks, that means undergoing a specific addition like heating, forming potassium chloride and oxygen gas. We need to balance it. So on the left hand side there are 1 potassium, 1 Cl and 3 oxygen. And on the right hand side there is 1 potassium, 1 chlorine and 2 oxygen. So let's balance it. So that means we need to balance only the oxygen atoms. So it is 3 and it is 2. So we can make them 6 by writing 2 on this side and 3 on this side. Now oxygen is balanced. So now let's cross check that whether like while you were balancing the oxygen atom, some other atoms got disturbed or not, or the reaction is still balanced. So let's check out. Now the potassium is 2 on this side, but it is 1 on this side. That means while you were balancing the oxygen, you were making it 6, the potassium moles got changed. So in order to balance potassium, what we'll do is we'll put 2K here. Now it is balanced, 2 on both sides. Now let's see for Cl. Cl is 2 and again while you were balancing K, the Cl automatically became balanced. So this is a balanced chemical reaction now. Another reaction is zinc plus hydrogen chloride forms zinc chloride plus hydrogen gas. Let's take the moles into consideration. Zinc is 1, hydrogen is 1, chlorine is 1 on the left hand side. On the right hand side, zinc is 1, chlorine is 2, hydrogen is 2. So that means we need to balance hydrogen and chlorine. Let's balance chlorine first. It is 2. Let's put 2 on this side. Now cross check for the other atoms. Zinc 1, 1. Hydrogen 2, 2, chlorine 2, 2. That means while you were balancing chlorine, the hydrogen automatically become balanced, and this is the chemical equation which is a balanced chemical equation now. Third, we have aluminium oxide, that is Al2O3, react with sulfuric acid to form aluminium sulfate, write this, and water. Let's balance this. So aluminium is 2, that means it is balanced. Oxygen is 3 and 4. So that means 7 on this side. And on this side, it is 12 and 1, 13. It is 13. So that means oxygen is 7 on left hand side and 13 on the right hand side. Let's see for hydrogen. It is 2 and 2 balanced. Let's see for sulfate. 1s on left hand side and 3s on right hand side. And that means this is the complete data. So that means we need to balance oxygen and sulfur, and we can balance it like by putting 3 in front of H2SO4 and 3 in front of water. And now if you'll see that the moles gets balanced, like aluminium is 2, oxygen we have 12 and 3, that is 15. And in this case also we have 12 and 3, that is 15. Hydrogen is 6, and even the hydrogen is 6 on this side. Sulfur is 3, and even on this side we see that sulfur is 3. So this is the balanced chemical reaction for this third part. List 5 changes that indicates that reaction has taken place. So what are those 5 changes? There can be a change in color. There can be a change in color. There can be the evolution of some gas. There can be a formation of precipitate. There can be a formation of precipitate. There can be energy changes, that is the heat energy is either absorbed or released, or there can be a change of state. There can be a change of state. So these 5 changes indicates that the reaction do take place in nature. How can you test the presence of evolution of hydrogen gas? So as I told you, for all the gases, we have different identification tests. Like if you want to test for hydrogen gas, what we need to do is we need to bring the matchstick near the mouth of the tube from where this gas escapes. What we'll see that the matchstick will start burning, and it will burn with pale blue flame. It will burn with pale blue flame and will produce the popping sound. And these property indicates the presence of hydrogen gas. Another question is, how can you test the presence of evolution of carbon dioxide gas? So if we want to test the carbon dioxide gas, we have to take the lime water. We have to take the lime water, which is calcium hydroxide. So when you pass this carbon dioxide through a lime water, what happens that as soon as it is passed through lime water, it leads to milkiness in lime water due to formation of calcium carbonate, and along with that we get water formed. So formation of this calcium carbonate makes the lime water milky. So we can say that the test for carbon dioxide is passed through lime water. If the lime water turns milky due to formation of calcium carbonate, that means the gas which is present is identified as carbon dioxide gas. Next question is, predict the type of change that is taking place in these cases. As you know that we have 2 types of changes, physical and chemical change. So just make out that what type of change is there in these options. First is rusting of iron. You know that rusting of iron is an irreversible change, and in this a new substance, that is rust, is formed. So this is a chemical change. Another is cooking an egg. When you cook an egg, it becomes omelette, and you cannot reverse it. You cannot make it egg again. So again, it is a chemical change. Ripening of bananas. If the bananas gets ripened, you cannot make them fresh again. So it is an irreversible change. That is, it is a chemical change. Breaking of glass pen is again a chemical change. Making of tea is again a chemical change, because you cannot reverse and cannot separate the sugar, the milk, water from them. So that means these all changes specify the chemical change, because these changes are not temporary, they are permanent in nature. We know that temporary changes are the physical changes, but if there is a permanent change, like we can see in this, so they indicate the chemical change, and these changes are irreversible, and in them the new substance is also formed, in them the energy changes are also taking place. So that means it refers to the chemical change. Thank you for watching this video, and for more learning experience you can visit to www.vossarax.com. So with this we finished the part 1, and now we'll be doing the part 2, in which we'll be covering the different types of chemical reaction that we come across.